Hey guys, what's up? It's Zola, and today we're going to be having a look at the channel set of plugins. Now, the thing you want to remember with the channel set of plugins is a lot of these are based on math and moving channels and copying. Basically, each picture is made up of a red, a blue, and a green channel, and a lot of these plugins do fairly similar things in that they will help you like map the blue channel onto like the red channel, or vice versa, or take the the black and white information from one channel and add it to another one. And they're basically, a lot of these are filters I don't use, if I'm honest, and a lot of these are filters that are only going to be really useful if you're trying to build maps and that kind of stuff. But I'm going to try and show you a couple of these and maybe some of the ones that aren't that interesting, just for the sake of let's just, instead of me babbling, let me show you. So a lot of these will like do some funky stuff to your color. I mean, this one, arithmetic, is one of the ones that has so many possibilities, because you can dial up the colors here on the red, blue, and the green channel, but then you can change the way, so the operation and the OR operation is pretty useful, because you can get these really cool like posterize effects, which can be kind of neat if you're trying to do like cartoony stuff. And I'm sure there's kind of like mathematical reasons why you would use these, but in terms of being a designer, I just kind of like, they do cool stuff in terms of outlooks or looks that I might use, and that's generally the way I look at most of the plugins. And in this case, yes, I mean, this is kind of like, could be used in a screen scanning environment. I mean, it's pretty similar to there's an effect called posterize, which does something similar, but you can see there's not that much control in posterize. It's kind of like you have the levels of color you can have, and as you dial it up, you get more or less. And you can see here you get more banding the lower the colors you go with. Whereas here with the arithmetic, you can kind of change the colors, you can kind of change the operation to get completely different looks, and then again dial these back and forth. There we have like a green tint, but if we change it to max, we have this kind of like crazy kind of like pink solarized look. So I sometimes mess with this if I just want to, I mean, I don't know a lot of these by heart, but if I just wanted like a different look to something I might find in the color correction plugins, because you never know what you're going to get basically, and it's quite a fun plugin to play around with. So definitely recommend the arithmetic one. Then you have stuff like blend and calculations. Now these are pretty similar. Now what they do essentially is pretty similar to these layer modes. So I've got an example here. In this comp, I've got this other piece of footage, which is Neil jumping around at a different time to the one that we're actually looking at here. And if we come to blend with layer, so we add the other layer. Now I've still got it hidden, but this plugin is basically calculating it in the background. And then you can do weird stuff like crossfade between the two of them. Now I need to select the layer first, so there we go, I've selected it, and then I can like crossfade between the two of them. Now this is kind of pointless, because if I turn that off and just turn this off and crossfades down manually with the opacity, it's exactly the same effect. So there's reasons why I would not want to do that, because it's quite easy to do it in there. And then there's other operations like color only, tint, and then the level at which we're affecting this, but not much is kind of useful in terms of what they're doing. And again, if I wanted to apply have these effects happen, I would just turn the layer on and then mess with the blending mode. So really pretty pointless plugin in my opinion. Calculations and stuff does exactly the same. Calculations and I believe channel combiner are pretty similar, because they involve you taking an output channel, so either the grey, the red, the green, or the blue. So let's take the red channel, and then so this is the same as doing like if I turn this off, pressing alt and 1 on my keyboard, because this is showing me my red channel. So if we look at what that looks like now, and then we turn this on, you're going to see it's exactly the same. So if I toggle the red channel on and off now, you're seeing exactly the same result. And what you can do is invert it, which you can do kind of with the invert plugin anyway. But then you can take the second layer once again, take another layer, and then somehow, here we have the opacity, we can take maybe the green channel from that one and you know, again, I don't really find much use for these plugins. And then you can have all these operations, which are just the blend mode operations, which you find down there. So again, not a plugin I would particularly find useful. However, there are some in here that I am going to go about. Channel combiner we used when we were trying to build a mat. So it was when I was trying to no, I've confused that with another one, I apologize. Composite is kind of cool because it allows you to blend an effect that you have applied to your layer. Now what does that mean? So at the moment I've got my footage here. Let's come into here and add a ramp. So if I come to ramp, I'm going to add this ramp, and what this has done is added a free color gradient over my footage, right? So if I change this to maybe purple, so we got a kind of nice gradient going. So we got orange to blue, and then with this purple, by the way, this purple in between, so kind of like a calypso color theme. Now this at the moment is applied onto my footage. Now this plugin luckily has all these things built in, overlay, dodge and that. But if I was to come to that's because it's an advanced plugin. If I was to come to the one in After Effects, we have the option of a black and white point, so the start and an end. So I could try and do it, but again, I've only got 2 colors here, so this is already more limited. But I don't have those blend operations. I can't screen it over my footage. I can't add it. And that's where CC Composite comes in, because you can, by turning it on, it's going to bring my footage back, but then I can choose add, and what it's going to do is take the effects above it and it's going to screen them by kind of adding them in. And this is a useful way to have your effects actually built into your footage without making a separate layer, which I could do here and add, which is kind of doing the same thing. But again, these are 2 separate layers, so it's a kind of way of just kind of building all those effects into the footage itself. So kind of cool, because that's a really simple example, but there's so many different ways in which you see we've got a lot more than just the blend modes. We have copy, we have behind, we have in front, so you can actually stack a lot of effects onto the same layer, so that's pretty cool. If we come back to channel, invert is super useful, because often I kind of usually sometimes use this literally on a frame by frame basis to just add a kind of flash, you know, just to make things interesting, like pew, like that, bang, 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 and it kind of adds a bit of life and movement. And you can also take the different channels. If I just want to invert the red channel, we get this kind of look, which is kind of neat. Fine, there it is. And there's so many different operations in here and the ways you can actually apply the invert that you can get some interesting looks and make Neil look like an alien in this case. Other things is set channels is probably the one I was thinking about earlier. So if I was wanting to make a matte out of this, so we have find the channel with the most contrast, in this case the red channel, I would change the sources green to red and blue to red as well, and then there we go. Now we have a black and white image, which is it is the footage, but I've changed all the coloring information to purely the red channel, so that now I can go ahead and apply levels and curves and try and build a matte out of this. As I've explained in my other tutorials, a matte is what we use to kind of mask something out. So if I was to duplicate that now, remove all the effects from my bottom layer and change this to a Luma matte, we would see here that I've created a kind of transparency based off the red information, just doing that. So in this case, obviously I've not particularly used it for any reason, but it's just kind of good to know that it's there. And that's how I would go about building a matte once I found the channel with the most contrast. Last but not least, we have set matte is pretty useful. So if you have a layer which is you want to use for several layers, so if let's do this with a rectangle, so I'm going to create this rectangle, turn that off, come into here, apply set matte, and I'm going to use the shape layer. Now what this means is that I can have one, if I just copy and paste this effect, copy and paste this effect, it means I'm essentially using the alpha information. So if I solo this layer, you'll see I have a stroke and a fill. I can even turn the stroke off if it's confusing you. This is the alpha information. I have this filled in and I have everything else kind of transparent. And obviously the way I could use that as a mask is come into here and duplicate it and then put it above this layer and do an alpha matte for both this one and this one. But if you've got like 15 layers and you want them all to use the alpha information of this one layer at the top of your comp as a matte, it's actually really useful to just set up this effect, copy and paste it onto the layers that you want. So if I come into here now, it's changed, so I need to change that back to shape layer 1, and so now I'm using the alpha channel from shape layer 1, which is the one I've just shown you, to have an alpha in this. So I'm setting a matte, and there's no pre-comping going on, there's no alpha or track matting. So that is actually a super useful way of using one layer to matte a shit ton of others, like further down. So definitely set matte, one of my favorites. And last but not least, the other one I kind of like is Minimax. So this is again useful when you're building a matte. As I said, the channel panel is really useful when building mattes. There's a lot of information in here, which is let's do this. So what I'm going to do is start building a matte. So I'm going to desaturate this, and I'm going to come and crunch it up. So basically, like, darken the darks, brighten the whites. Maybe I want this a lot darker though, so let's bring that back. And let's just say like this is cool, but we want to just expand the borders of this ever so slightly. Now so let's just say we want to have this color ramp, and we're going to use this as our matte. So if I come to Luma Matte, we can see here we've used that white information to reveal our gradient. Now what Minimax does, if I turn off my Luma Matte and come into here, is it allows you to almost expand the borders of your white information. So let's do that here. Minimax, and if you look on if we have a look at the white edge we have here, watch as I expand this. You can you see all the white moving out? This is almost like using a choker, and it's a really useful technique for just expanding the borders of your image ever so slightly, and just thickening up your Luma stroke, and then that way you've essentially just slightly made your matte a bit wider, which can come in super useful. So if I come into here and do it on the fly, you'll see I can bring it in, or I can actually thicken it up, and obviously we're going to get these cubes, but if you're only doing it by a couple of pixels, then you can see it's a really useful way of just extending the range of your mattes there just ever so slightly. So that's kind of cool to know. So there it is, kind of a really specialized panel, but I hope I showed you some stuff. There's obviously some cool creative uses you can use to get some interesting color channels out of it, to apply different X-ray looks and that kind of stuff, and also lots of super useful calculations and arithmetics for making mattes and applying mattes, as we saw with the set matte function. So really advanced one today, guys. I apologize for that, but I am going down in terms of the the alphabetical order, and just wanted to cover everything as we go down. So hopefully, even if this is not that useful to you today, maybe once you get more acquainted with After Effects and you come back and watch this in a few weeks or months, a lot more of these might make sense, and this will come in super useful for you, especially if you start getting into compositing. So as always, thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow.